and welcome once again to the National Land Realty podcast. This is episode number 129. I'll be your host today. My name is Matt Christian. I'm the Chief Marketing Officer at National Land Realty and our default podcast host. So today, we're going to be talking about selling land and particularly prepping your land before you go to sale. Now, it might seem like it is a fairly straightforward process. Land is something that sells itself, but getting things right before you sell your land can drastically increase the appeal to buyers and may actually influence the price that buyers are willing to pay once it hits the market. Today, we'll be discussing this topic with Anders Land, a land real estate agent out of South Carolina, and you did hear that right. What you just heard is probably the single greatest name in the history of land real estate. His last name is Land. Now, there's zero possibility that he is not absolutely sick and tired of that comment. And it's going to follow him for the rest of his life. Believe me, I understand. My name is Mac. And if I had $1 for every time I heard a joke about Big Mac or macaroni and cheese or take your pick. Those of you who played video games back in the day, we got Mike Tyson's Punch Out with the main character was, I believe, Little Mac. I've heard it all. I understand his struggle. So I do give him a hard time about that in the podcast, as I should, because it was new to me. Anyways, we're going to talk to him today about selling land besides having a great name. Anders is a highly knowledgeable agent who knows exactly what you should be doing when you go to sell land on the open market. He is somebody worth listening to. Now, sit back and enjoy. Okay, so I'm sitting here talking to Anders Land, and the first question I have is, did you decide to work with Land because of the surname?
If I got $1 for every time someone made that joke, I'd be out in Idaho fishing with you, not selling land. But
well, I mean, it's the most obvious thing you could put. Like, you might have the single greatest name in the history of land real estate agents. Yeah.
It definitely helps, but it does cause some confusion along the way. People thinking it's the company name, they're thinking it's some marketing slogan. I'm like, nope, just born with it.
Just born with it. Yeah. No, having the last name Christian, I get a lot of religious,
Should have been a preacher.
Should have been a preacher. Yeah, no, it's exactly it. So it's surnames do that. Where's okay, I just have to ask because I'm curious. Do you know where does the last name come from?
I do not know. I'd like to think that my ancestors owned thousands and thousands of acres, but unless it was sold many years ago, that's not the case.
Because it's like mine. I know exactly where it came from. It's like, okay, like Christian follower, right? Like,
yeah, exactly.
Talking European but like I was just curious about where Land might come. Okay. I want to deviate this way off topic just because it's the most awesome thing ever. Anyways, Anders, tell us a little bit about your background. You did some time in Texas. That sounds funny. You did some time in Texas. Worked in Texas for a bit, working with land, doing ranch and farm sales, and now you're in South Carolina. Just tell us a little bit about your journey and how you ended up where you are now.
Yeah, so I grew up in a small town, Manning, South Carolina, about 3,500 people. We didn't have a mall or a movie theater, or bowling alley, or any of that fun stuff. So for fun, we pretty much just go out and play on land and ride four-wheelers and shoot guns and all that fun stuff that you do growing up in a small town. Eventually went off to college, went to the University of South Carolina, actually studied real estate there, got close to graduating and figured I should probably use that degree in real estate, and wanted to get away from South Carolina for a year or two, just go see the country, do something different for a little bit. So looked at a map, saw Texas, saw that it was pretty big, figured they had a lot of land to sell out there. So went to Texas for 2 years, had a great time, loved everyone that I worked with, loved everyone that I met, loved the experience, but ultimately knew I always wanted to come back home. That's where my family is, where my girlfriend was. So I always wanted to come back home, and figured if I could sell land in a state that I'd never been to, I should be able to do it back home. So that's how I got here with National Land, and haven't looked back since.
So you went to school for real estate. Did you have the mindset to work with land sales, or was it residential and land, and you ended up in land. Like, how did you get specifically in the land?
Yeah, so once I started looking at the real estate degree I had and thinking about all of the things that I could do with it, I didn't want to be underwriting commercial deals in New York City or anything like that. And growing up hunting and loving land and knowing a lot about land just from being on land a lot, it kind of just came natural that land was a good fit for me. I got more excited about talking about the quality of deer on a property versus a double vanity bathroom or something like that. So that's why I kind of went the land avenue.
I That's such a good response too, because it's like, I mean, I know plenty of folks that are residential agents, and the each one has its own set of problems, right? But I could talk for hours about the location of an ingress, or like where your hunting stand is set up, or you know is this water source good for ducks? Like that kind of stuff. I could talk for hours, but if it came down to marble counters or something like that, like I would rather throw myself out of a window. Like,
Absolutely, I'm the same way.
I totally understand. I understand that, and it's just it's not saying one is better than the other. It's just my mindset, is all it is. And yeah, I totally understand the pathway. Uh, Tell me about the difference between being in South Carolina and Texas. What was it culture shock, or were you pretty well prepped to jump into Texas?
Oh, it's completely different. I'm sure you could find two, but I don't know of two different states versus South Carolina, where everything's swamp and big, beautiful trees, and out there it's red dirt and far as the eye can see. So yeah, there was definitely some differences when I got out of there. Everything from the barbecue being different out there. It truly was very different. One thing that I think is kind of funny is out there, oil is a big deal. And here's timber is a big deal. So I like to think the money out there is under the ground. The money here is above the ground.
I think that's pretty accurate too, because there's a lot of lowland country and very hot country out there. And I haven't been to South Carolina a few times now. It's like I get so disoriented in South Carolina because I can't see sight lines. It's brush as far as you can see, and you very rarely see a horizon line. And so like getting your bearings, other than like sun and time of day, is next to impossible out there.
Yeah, I brought a coworker from Texas to our property in South Carolina, and I said, "Do you think it's pretty?" And he said, "You can't see anything." Whereas out there, the way my simple mind works is hunting. I'm like, you can see everything. There's nothing out here. There's nothing to be killed. Where the trees kind of give you a bit of a surprise. You are always expecting something to walk out of the tree line.
Yeah, you got to jump them up.
Yeah.
So today, we're jumping in. We're talking about prepping land for before the sale, and it's something I think the previous episode actually we talked with Wayne Dunston out of Texas, and we talked about pricing being so extremely important when it comes down to selling land, when it comes down to selling anything, right? Like, the price is wrong, things don't move. That's just economics, and the price is what the market is willing to bear. It's an organic moving target, especially with real estate. As we've all seen, the prices fluctuate. But what we're talking about today is sort of it's the lipstick, right? It's getting that land to look right for sale and to look inviting. And I feel like that's another understated part of the sale, because again, the conversations come back all the time to marketing, and how are we going to market this property? It's like, well, first start with the most important, like price and how does it look? And did you take great photos of it? Like, that's the other part of it too. Like, that's huge value up front without having to worry about marketing, because you get it, everything after that is distribution, and there's marketing channels for it and stuff. But these things are so important. And so we've kind of divided, you had an outline that you sent to me. I wanted to make it sound like we're kind of going at this ad lib, but we talked beforehand. We have notes, right? So, take me into sort of, have you developed these things over time as far as what should be prepped on land, or have you learned from your mistakes to get here, or how did you kind of come up with these sort of standards for getting land ready?
Yeah, so it's really what it boils down to is just being proactive and as the seller, going ahead and doing some of the things that a buyer is going to either have to do or want to do, and also improving the showing experience of when you ultimately do get a buyer who's interested. Obviously, we can make a property look good online, but about when they're actually boots on the ground, making it as enjoyable of a showing experience as possible for them. And then on the other side of things, there's a lot of permitting and stuff like that that goes into a property, especially when they're wanting to build a house. So just go ahead and getting some of those things done. So when they're on the property and they're asking you questions, and they're asking if you have stuff or don't have stuff, you want to have as much information for them as possible to give them.
Yeah. So, jumping into that, walk me through, in sort of how you outlined to me was differences between residential and hunting properties. So let's start with residential. So when we say residential, it might not be what a listener is thinking as far as residential. We're not talking a residential house in the neighborhood. We're talking a big chunk of land that happens to have a residence on it. So tell me, sort of some of the steps that you advise taking when selling sort of a residentially based piece of land.
Yeah, so anytime a property, someone calls me about property and they're interested in selling it, the first question I ask myself is, who's the buyer for this property? Obviously, if it's 1 acre in town, you don't want to look at the deer hunting quality of it. So it's kind of figuring out who's going to buy it and why they're going to buy it. And then that can start to lead you down the avenue of things that you want to do to make sure that that specific buyer has all the information they need to make them willing to make an offer on the property ultimately.
Gotcha. So, and what are some of the tangible things that you want to do as far as like if you got a place with a residence on it, like what are you wanting to? What are some of the things that you should look to do? I guess it would be my question.
Yeah. So if we're talking about raw land where someone's going to want to build a house on it, ultimately, first thing you have to make sure there's a spot to put a house. In South Carolina, we have a lot of stuff that's very heavily wooded. So you may want to clear a drive in and open up a 1/4 acre so that a buyer can visualize, okay, a house can actually go here. And then when you're talking about a house, you ultimately need three things. You need power, you need water, and you need sewage or septic. So go ahead and getting those permits taken care of. Septic permits in South Carolina are a big deal. You have to get a perk test done through what in South Carolina it's called DHEC, is the government program that does that. And they have about a 6-month waiting period to get your perk test done. So that's one thing that you can go ahead and be proactive and get in line essentially to get that perk test. And then any buyer who's going to come look at it, that's going to be one of their first questions is has it perked yet? And when you can hand them over a septic permit saying, here's from DHEC that you can have a septic here, that's very important to buyers. And then as far as power and water goes, if you don't have power on the property already, you can look at quotes for that and go ahead and have different quotes from different companies on what it will cost to get power to a property. And oftentimes, the power companies will actually bring it to a property for free if you're going to have your primary residence there, because they know over time they're going to make that money back through you paying your electricity bill each month. And then the third thing is water. So you can have a well drilling company come out and give you an estimate of how deep they think they're going to have to drill to get good water. And I know in other states, there may be some areas where you can't even get water. So that's very important to make sure that water is feasible. And all three of those things are feasible if you think it's going to be a property that someone's going to want to build a house on.
Yeah. And so, what you're kind of getting at is take care of all of the hassle that the future buyer would have to go through otherwise and make it as easy as possible for them to get into the property is kind of what I'm hearing. Like take care of all the things that are a total pain.
Yeah. And one thing I've learned is if you don't have an answer, they're always going to assume the worst. If they ask if you have a perk test and you say no, they're going to assume that they're going to need a expensive engineered system for sewage out there. So just having all that stuff in hand to where every question they ask, you can say, yes, here's this. Yes, here's this. Yes, here's this. To not give them a reason to be nervous about buying the property.
I was going to say, because perk test, that decides kind of like basically tells you how many bathrooms you can have without alternative systems, right? Like
yeah, they take in several different things: the slope of the land, the type of soil, how well it drains, stuff like that. And then you can either get a conventional system, which is cheaper, or an engineered system is what you have to do for some properties. And that can be 3x, 4x the cost of a conventional system.
Right. And that's to your point, people assuming the worst. You go in there and it's like, if there's not a perk test done, you're like, oh man, it's probably a wetland or something like that. Like there's no drainage, or there's assumptions that could get made where it's like, oh no, like this is going to decide what kind of home I can build, or what kind of adjustments I have to make to my life to do this thing.
Exactly. And even if it won't perk, you can't change that about a property. So you might as well go ahead and get that perk test done ahead of time. And like you mentioned earlier, that may affect the pricing of it, or you can already kind of prepare that buyer for that and kind of give them more of a soft landing versus them waiting on results from a test and then it coming back bad. That seems to be worse. And if you can get ahead of it and go ahead and prep them that is the case.
So with identifying a home site, is there risk that you pick the wrong location and something like that? Like if you go ahead and like identify, okay, this is an ideal home site area, depending on the property, is there risk with that people are like, I don't want to put a home there? Is that kind of a thing?
Yeah, absolutely. And on some small acreage stuff, there may be only one logical home site that makes sense. So that's pretty cut and dry. But then when we're talking about larger acreage stuff, you don't want to go in there and butcher a bunch of trees and it end up being the wrong place. So that's where it kind of takes a little bit of strategy and thinking, okay, they're probably going to want the home site at the highest point, highest elevation, or maybe near a natural feature, maybe beside a creek or something like that, or next to a big, beautiful oak tree or something like that. So yeah, a little bit of strategy does come into play with that. And also when I say clear a home site, that may not necessarily mean flattening it to the ground. You could still leave some pretty trees there. And that way, if the buyer does want to come in and ultimately put their house there, they may be 1 or 2 trees away from doing so.
I got you. And so when you're budgeting for something like this, right? So you have a piece of land, selling it out, has residential prospects. What is the ballpark areas in? Okay, I know the answer is always it depends when it comes to asking this stuff, but have you seen sort of a rough estimate of like, okay, you should count on putting at least this much into fixing your land up, dolling it up so you can go to market?
Yeah, just like you said, it does depend. But I can give you a good example. I had a property listed just a couple months ago, and we had it on the market for 6 months. It was as thick with trees as you can imagine. You could barely take a step onto the property. We had it listed for 6 months, actually with Nick Artis, who's in our Columbia office, not too far up the road. And we had several showings on it, but just no real interest, no offers. And then when that listing agreement ran out after 6 months, the seller called us and asked what we could do to move the property ultimately. And we told him that we thought if he spent $1,500 is what it ended up coming out to be on clearing about a 150, 200 foot road and then opening up a 1/4 acre, we thought it would help it sell. And that's exactly what we did. We paid a land clearing company to come in, do a half a day of work, $1,500. And then once we put it back on the market, we had 2 offers within the first week, both at full asking price. So it definitely helped.
Like you brought in the electricity, water, and stuff like that along with the road, or was it just the road?
On that one, it was just the road. We didn't do anything with septic. We didn't do anything with power. There was power along the road. And like I mentioned earlier, we'd gotten word from the power company that they would pull it to a home site for free in order to have that account. But yeah, on that one, strictly all we did was $1,500 and it sold in a week.
That's not a lot of input versus what you get out of it.
Exactly. And when we told him at the beginning to do that, he was thinking, I don't want to spend any more money on this property. I'm ready to get rid of it. But what it ultimately did is it ended up wasting 6 months of time that it sat on the market when we could have had it sold to start if he would have cleared the road and home site.
So there's a demonstrable difference that you've experienced firsthand of just like dolling things up a bit, and it moves the property, gets it to market. And what I'm getting, just psychologically, right? You're, as a consumer, being able to visualize, oh, this is how I get into the property. This is where my home would go. That much of a difference versus, hey, there's a wall of trees.
Yeah, absolutely. And it doesn't always cost money. You can do stuff as simple as just take 10 minutes and pick up the trash along your road frontage. Even stuff like that can help. The first impression is obviously the most important. So you don't want someone pulling up and seeing trash and instantly being turned off on a property before they even step foot on it. So some of these things that don't cost money at all, just cleaning up. If you do have trails on the property or road in, just cutting back the limbs a little bit. No one likes to show up to a property and drive down the driveway and their truck is being scraped up by branches. So some things don't even take money. They may just take a little bit of sweat equity.
Right. So, and depending on, the tools that you have and the time that you have, you can put in, there's a lot of ways to save money on that. There's sweaty ways to do it, but there are ways to save money on if you're looking to sell land, but you don't want to dump a bunch into it. Tell me a little bit about, your prep with a chunk of land that has a residential focus. Obviously is going to focus on the residents, but tell me about something as simple as like hunting land. What's the process look like that's different on that versus a residence?
Yeah, so hunting land can be a little bit different because number one, there's a completely different use. The person might not necessarily be living out there; they may be traveling in from out of town just to hunt there. So a big thing with hunting properties is trails. People on larger acreage, you want to be able to get around it. You don't want to be ducking under branches and weaving through briars the whole time you're trying to get there. So that can be as simple as taking a machete and a chainsaw and clearing where you can walk the whole property, or on a larger property, getting a forestry mulcher in there and clearing some areas out where you can have hunting lanes and be able to drive and really access on hunting properties is what I would say is the most important thing on a basic level.
Gotcha. And so what are some of the other things that you can get set up in there? So, I mean, trails, access points, great call. Exactly to your point, nobody wants to get stuck with, briars the entire time you're walking through the property. Make sure it's kind of this, it's the same principle as a residential site, except for the roads are smaller.
Yeah.
Quite as wide.
Absolutely.
Sorry.
Another important thing with hunting properties is obviously they're buying it for hunting. So you want to show them the quality of deer, turkey, whatever that area may be prominent for. So trail cameras are a great way. You can buy the non-cell cameras for like $25 a pop. Put a couple of those out. Get some good trail camera photos. So that way when buyers show up and they're asking what you have out there, you can show them. It's not necessarily the campfire stories of the deer that were the biggest deer you've ever seen. You can actually show them what is physically on the property, maybe not at that necessarily time, but in the past, and what type of genetics are in that area.
So one thing that you kind of talked to me about was running a brush hog through or something like that. And I was curious is there any kind of preference on cutting things down versus running a prescribed burn on the land beforehand? What presents better, or something that you would want to concern with that? Like, should you time out the sale of land to be able to do a prescribed burn first, or should you just brush hog it? Or I'm throwing.
Yeah, no, absolutely. As far as a brush hog goes, it's really important to keep roads mowed down. Like we were talking about before, you don't want to bring your brand new truck to see a property and the whole time you're having grass and branches and whatever else hit it. So the brush hog is definitely important for keeping the roads mowed down. And then like we were talking about thick trees with briars and whatever else, prescribed fire can be a great tool to thinning some of that out. And like you said, when when you come down to South Carolina, whenever fires ran through something, you want to be able to see. And that helps with it a lot, and has tons of wildlife benefits as well for turkey, deer, pretty much everything. When you run fire through something, open it up a little bit for some new growth. That
makes sense. Yeah, I didn't know if you were talking about like running brush hog through the general area and try to knock things down, or so you're talking just take the road down, and then if you want to take anything else down, burn it out.
Yeah, fire is a great tool for opening up any thickets or anything like that.
Yeah, and that makes a ton of sense. So as far as getting things ready, is there a general timeline that you want to give yourself? So like I can imagine a lot of the time when you're talking to a client, they want to go to market immediately and they're ready to go and come on, let's get this thing done with. Do you push back at all and say, you know what, take a couple of weeks, do this? Like how much time do you usually give to get things prepped?
Yeah, every case is different, and some properties are turnkey. They're ready to hit the market right now, and people keep it in great condition. And then some people are at a stage where they have to sell tomorrow. They don't have time or the excess money, or maybe they're out of state or something where they can do some of these steps to put a little makeup on the property, like you said. So it's a little bit different. But if someone does have the time, they're not dying to sell right away. They're obviously wanting to sell, but if they don't have any timeline to make or anything like that. Yeah, I like to say let's take a little bit of time. Let's clean the place up a little bit, and that's where partnering with the land professional is good too, because I'm young and can go out there and help them mow roads or whatever else it may be. So
did you just offer yourself up for labor?
If they're wanting to list, I'll help them.
There you go. So I would call that a value add. That's a value add. I will come on. I'll make you a road. All right. So when you're going to do this, is there, and this is curiosity too, is there a specific time of season that is better to do this stuff at? Because I mean, from a marketing mindset, I want to wait till the mud season's gone in the spring, and I want to make sure that the stuff is bloomed to where it can present well. But that's not how, the best time to sell is when you don't have to. So it can, hopefully you're picking your time. But is there a time of season that is sort of optimal to get the right presentation, that properties tend to move faster? Is that seasonal at all in your area? And I realize we're talking South Carolina, right? Because it's completely different everywhere else. So I was just curious if in your area there was a noticeable difference in time.
Yeah, springtime is my favorite time of year because it's not so hot that you can't walk a property without sweating. Everything's green and blooming and alive, and it makes for a great experience for anyone coming to look at a property. They can really see all the colors and the beauty that the property has versus showing something in the dead of winter where all the leaves are gone, and it's just not as pretty. So I'd say springtime is my favorite time of year to sell land. And if someone truly could wait till whenever they don't have to sell, like you said, I would recommend that they list in the springtime.
That's exactly why, to bring up geography, like what you just said, I would have never thought about, but having been out there, you made me think about like, oh yeah, I would never want to go walk a property in the middle of summer in South Carolina. I would probably have a heat stroke.
Yeah. A funny question I get from some people sometimes is during the dead of summer, they'll ask, is there mosquitoes or are there snakes? And I'm like, well, it's South Carolina in the summertime. You can bet on that.
Yeah. So, I mean, that's something to keep in mind, is you want people to be able to walk the property, because that just makes a better showing, right? Like they're able to see it and they're able to walk around and check out the land. So looking at a time of season where they can do so, and take it into context too, like especially if the potential buyers could be older, they might not be able to walk the land in the middle of summer. So if you go to sell in the summer, you might be missing out on some buyers. Like that's something to always consider.
Yeah, absolutely. And a lot of times when we're showing hunting properties, it's a family ordeal. They're buying that place for the whole family to come out on weekends. And if they're out there in the dead of winter, everyone's swatting mosquitoes, and the wife isn't happy. Typically, that means they're not going to get the property if the wife isn't happy. So yeah, it's definitely something that goes into play. Another thing, speaking on the family side of things, I've seen where stuff as simple as on a hunting property, putting a fire pit and some chairs around it. When the family's out there looking at it, they start to visualize, okay, this is a place where we can all come out and enjoy a nice dinner out in the woods, out of the hustle and bustle of the city. So as far as prepping property, clearing a little hunt campsite, I guess you could say, and something as simple as a $200 fire pit from Tractor Supply could really get the gears turning in that family's head of, okay, this isn't a place for dad just to sneak off to and hunt. This is a place that our whole family can gather and make memories and be outdoors and not on an iPhone or iPad or any of that stuff.
That's a really, really great idea as far as just getting the general presentation down, right? Because walking land is going to give you a certain impression, but sitting down and just having an enjoyable moment is going to change the whole dynamic of the property. You can't visualize yourself there till you take some time and spend some time there, right? So it's giving someone that sort of kind of like an abbreviated experience on the land to where they can experience that. So that's something too to think about is if you're the landowner and you want to get this thing ready to sell, is maybe prep an area like that and get it ready.
Yeah, and that goes right back to the land clearing and clearing roads, and then opening up it maybe an acre or less that you're opening up just where they can kind of have a home base where everyone parks the trucks before they head out to hunt or whatever it may be. But yeah, giving people that visual of seeing themselves out there with people and being able to enjoy it together really, really helps, especially when it comes to families.
How long does it take you to clear out an acre?
Someone that job I was just telling you about, they did it in half a day. They were $3,000 for a full day, which was 8 hours, and it was half a day that they cleared out about a quarter of an acre and roads as well. So it doesn't take long once people get going on those forestry mulchers. Oh
yeah, no, I'm impressed because like I said, I've seen the landscape out there. It's thick. It's much thicker.
Yeah.
So it's like okay. So that's it. You could call that we're going to call that a rough estimate that you can generally clear out that much land in a half day. $1,500 for a half day, $1,500 for a half day's work, $3,000 for a full day's work.
Yeah, and you would be very surprised at the stuff they can get done, and really how different it looks when you can actually see the property. It makes a world of difference, and it's hard to monetize the amount that it helps for what you resell your property for. But I would be willing to bet that it's worth the money to clear out a spot on a property.
Yeah, you just have to ask yourself what sells better, an ugly house or a pretty house.
Exactly.
Excellent. So, as far as these priorities go, are there any others that you would say that landowners should consider in as far as land prep before they sell? We've talked about season, we've talked about clearing out brush, we've talked about getting permits ready to go. Is there anything else that sort of that a landowner would want to be like, okay, this would help my cause if I was going to sell?
Yeah, one simple thing that for whatever reason people like it, I guess it has to do with the security, but just putting a gate at the entrance helps the curb appeal. Ultimately lets people know where to go when you say it's the property with the red gate. Gives them a sense of security. That's a simple one that really helps sell a place for whatever reason it may be. And I looked the other day, and you can get a farm gate for like $150 at Tractor Supply. So it's not a huge investment, but it really does help the curb appeal. Another one that's definitely worth mentioning is a survey. A lot of these properties have been in families for generations and generations. And the last survey may have been 100 years ago. So getting a survey done of a property, they'll put stakes out, and that helps the buyer visualize, okay, that's the corner, that's the corner. They know exactly what they're getting. There's no uncertainty in their mind of, okay, is this 50 acres really 50 acres, or Has it been split off in some areas in the past? So a survey definitely helps. Another thing, as far as prepping the land, if you have enough road frontage, sometimes you can make a lot more money if you split the property. If the area allows it, if people favor smaller properties versus larger properties, it may be because of the price point of the buyers in the area. But a lot of times you can make much more money. Say you have 10 acres and split it into 2 5-acre home sites versus 1 10-acre tract. A lot of times that can bring a lot more money.
Those are all great ideas. And what you just said actually just clarified to me that you're definitely a small town guy, because you gave directions by a landmark rather than a street or an address. Like this address, you go to the red gate. Like, that's how you know if somebody came from a small town or a big town.
It's always so funny when I'm out meeting with an older landowner, and we've had our meeting and I'm about to leave, and they're like, you know how to get back to the interstate? You go down, then you turn at the old country store. And I'm like, we have an iPhone in our pockets that can tell me exactly where to turn and to the minute how long it's going to take me to get there. But I always laugh when they sit there and spend 10 minutes explaining whose house to turn at, and then the quicker way to get there when we have something in our pockets that can do all that for us.
Yeah, the GPS helps, because growing up, it was always like turn at the house with the red roof and go up the lane 2 miles and take your second right. Like, it was always that kind of, yeah. I could go down that path for a little bit. No, so the things that you just covered, analyzing where your property is in terms of being close to a primary road, because that can help you subdivide a little bit more. You're going to get more per parcel if you are subdividing into smaller pieces. With land, there's an economy of scale. The more land you get, the more discounted it is. Mm-hmm. The nature of it. So being able to subdivide that up could get you a higher price point for your land's worth. Things like that are valuable. Get a gate, like it's $150, like you said, that you can do unless you get a really ugly gate, I'm guessing.
Yeah, you don't want to do that. Yeah, what I always explain to people as far as the land splitting side, it's like buying a case of water and then selling the bottles individually. Versus trying to sell the whole case. Someone's definitely going to be willing to pay more for a single bottle per bottle versus selling the whole case.
Yeah, no, that's a great way to put it. So yeah, if summarizing everything that you've kind of laid out here is make it easy, make it convenient, make it look good, and form a strategy with it. And every single one of those things are going to be things that you want to talk to a land agent for, because I think I have really great ideas in my landscaping, but that doesn't mean they're great ideas. So, or doesn't mean I've done it right. It doesn't mean maybe I just selected a home site, but I've accidentally put it in a wetland, and I don't know how to identify a wetland because it looked dry to me. There's different little things like that to think about that would want to talk to somebody like you for. So Anders, tell me a little bit, like, you're working throughout what area of South Carolina? Tell me where you're working, how to contact you.
We're in the low country of South Carolina, so that's pretty much Charleston, and then a 2-hour bubble is the way I like to think about it. And we have several offices across all of South Carolina, so we have it pretty well covered. But my territory, I guess you could say, is kind of the low country of South Carolina, up to 95, and then pretty much all the way down to the Georgia border is where we do most of our business.
Excellent. Well, Anders, unless do you have any? Did we miss anything?
Not that I can think of. No. I enjoyed speaking with you. This was awesome.
Excellent. Likewise. And so yeah, thank you very, very much for your time. This information I think is useful for any landowner looking to sell land. So if you have any questions, you can reach out to Anders or any of the agents at National Land Realty. If you're in the Charleston area or low country area, give Anders a call.
Thank you so much, Mac. Look forward to seeing you at the summit in February.
Oh, yeah, you're going. Good.
Yep, I'll be there.
All right, I'll see you there.
All right, thanks, Mac.
This concludes episode number 129 for the National Land Realty podcast, discussing what you need to do to prep your land before sale with Anders Land of National Land Realty, agent out of South Carolina. Now, you can learn more about land ownership and the buying and selling of land at nationalland.com. Don't forget to subscribe to this podcast.